Stop telling people to come to your church and hear your pastor. And isn't your pastor amazing? And if they could only hear your pastor, stop thinking that having a great pastor is going to win the world for Christ. Why? Like, it's great that you have a good pastor and he's knowledgeable in scripture and he's a good speaker and maybe he's actually a godly person. That's great. But here's the truth, guys. Your pastor is a big disconnect for most people concerning life, even concerning the Christian life. Because your pastor don't live where most people live. Your pastor is not in the position most people are in, right? Here's what people really want to know when it comes to God and living a godly life and living for Christ. How do I do that in my own life, in the real world? You want me to be a full-time Christian like your pastor? Yeah, give me the building and the budget and the staff and the 4 years of college. Sure. But if I don't got that, don't show me your pastor as an example of very much at all. Like, sure, we need pastors. We need wise, godly people, learned people to teach us things. That's fine. But we ain't learning how to be a Christian in a building with a large staff and a big budget, right? We're learning to be Christian like Jesus. Jesus didn't have a building. He didn't have a big budget. He was a tradesman. He roamed the streets. He was homeless a lot. He camped a lot. He traveled with a group of guys. You need to learn to be like Jesus, not like your pastor's version of Jesus, because your pastor's version of Jesus ain't the example that's relevant to most people. To be honest, guys, most people would be much more impressed with your spirituality because you live where they live. You're trying to tell someone at work to come see your pastor and come to your church because your pastor knows Jesus. They're looking at you and they're like, well, you live where I live, you work where I work, you grocery shop where I grocery shop. How about you? And if what we got is come see my pastor because he's so freaking amazing, they're going to be like, yeah, well, not relatable. It's not relatable, guys. Your pastor's not relatable, and no offense, he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, hopefully. He's in a church building with a staff, and he's hopefully training you to be a minister, because that's what Ephesians chapter 4 says, is that elders, leaders are for the equipping of the saints for works of ministry. You are a minister, guys. Your pastor is supposed to be preparing you to minister. Your pastor it's not a criticism and it's not mean. It's just your pastor is not the most relevant example of Christian. That's the truth. If you can learn how to be a Christian without the 4 years at Bible college, without the salary, without full-time dedication to reading scripture, preparing messages, writing books, whatever, you'll be a much better example than your pastor to the people around you in the world. The reason why the church is no longer reaching the world is because churches are no longer training congregates to be ministers. They're training congregates to bring people to their minister, not to be ministers. That's a problem. You know, Joel Osteen ain't a great example of a Christian. Not because he's not a good person or a good Christian, but because he's rare. He's an exception to the rule. Your pastor is probably more like Joel Osteen than you. He's an exception to the rule. He has a lot more time, a lot more money, a lot more ability to pursue Christ than you do. If you can do it with a full-time job, with a family, with a husband, with a wife, then other people will see that they can do it too. And that's a real example. Great, you've got a good pastor who's a good example of Christ. Probably not relatable to the world, probably why the world doesn't really care to come to your church to hear your pastor, because they've already seen Christ in you. And if you're not reflecting Christ well, then you've probably already lost your witness. And they don't care what your pastor says or what your pastor does, because they've already seen Christ through you. So don't rely on your pastor. Your pastor is the exception to the life most Christians are living. That's not a good thing either, right? But that's the truth. It ain't about your pastor. It's about you. Okay? All right. See ya.